So just close the evidence phase of the tribunal. First of all, by saying thank you to prosecuting counsel and their team for a professional presentation of the evidence. Your presentation has been helpful and will certainly help us to determine where the truth lies in these events. As a quick summation, as we know, these proceedings began on the 10th of November 2021, and we, in that following week, heard from 33 witnesses, many of them fact-based witnesses who'd experienced the brutality of the protests and had either been injured or lost loved ones. We heard from 7 expert witnesses. We then postponed the proceedings on the 14th of November 2021 in order to give the Islamic Republic of Iran an opportunity to attend the proceedings and also give other prospective witnesses an opportunity to be in touch with the prosecution team and in due course testify. We've now sat for a further 3 days and heard evidence from a range of insiders from the security services, including the police, the IRGC and the Basij. At the close of the first phase, we drew certain preliminary conclusions about the case that had been raised, which we found to be a serious case, suggesting state responsibility and individual criminal responsibility for a range of crimes against humanity and violations of international human rights law. As we noted at the close of the first phase, we commended the courage of the witnesses, both those who have lost or suffered injury themselves, but also, and particularly in the second phase, what we might call insiders who've testified at great risk to themselves in order to try to expose and illuminate the truth of how these protests occurred and how the Islamic Republic of Iran's security forces behaved in response to them. As we've noted in the past, we regret that the Islamic Republic of Iran has chosen not to attend these hearings or participate in any of the investigations conducted by Mr. Sabi's team. They've been repeatedly urged to come forward and answer the case that has been raised against the Islamic Republic of Iran. They have repeatedly failed to answer, which is unfortunate to say the least. Nonetheless, as we noted before, it will not stop us from considering the evidence. The evidence now raises, having heard more evidence, and more evidence which is broadly in line with what we heard in the first phase, and now suggests not just a serious case, but a more than arguable case for a variety of crimes against humanity and violations of human rights law. Even though the Islamic Republic of Iran has chosen not to attend these proceedings and has chosen to ignore the proceedings, we, the panel, repeat our commitment to consider the evidence for and against their participation in these violations with the same independence, impartiality, and consideration as all other evidence. And we will, and we do, commit to consider any arguable defence which may arise on the evidence. However, it must be said at the moment that defences to consistent brutalisation of protesters, unarmed protesters, harassment of family and loved ones, and a lack of action to identify those responsible may not easily raise arguable defences. But if they exist, we, the panel, are committed to explore them, identify them, and if we find them to be established, or if we find that the prosecution rather has not proven them to be not having merit, we shall deal with those defences and we will present them as part of our judgment. So in summary, Council have suggested that we should find the Iranian state led by Ali Khamenei responsible for crimes against humanity and violations of human rights law. According to them, nothing can be done without him, and he is first and foremost responsible. His intent can be discerned from his position, his acts, and his statements. Council has asked us to apply the presumption of innocence and assume good character on behalf of the 160 officials that they allege are responsible for these violations. Of these 160 officials, the prosecution allege that the Supreme Leader, the President, Cabinet, members of the Security Council, ministers, governors, security forces, judicial actors, including judges and prosecutors, and more, are responsible for a criminal plan to quell the protests, effectively using whatever force was necessary. As a consequence, the prosecution say, there were attacks on peaceful protests using military hardware, which involved indiscriminate attacks, maiming, killing security forces given authority to attack at will. Such forces or such attacks involved the use of child soldiers, torture and ill treatment, denial of medical treatment, use of persecution of relatives to ensure violations were kept quiet, and a variety of other acts which the prosecution say amounts to crimes against humanity and violations of national law and the Convention of Civil and Political Rights. According to the prosecution, even when compared to the Islamic Penal Code, which has been somewhat subsided by those instruments I've just mentioned, whichever standard is applied, the Islamic Republic of Iran is responsible for these violations. They ask us to find the Islamic Republic of Iran and these 160 individuals responsible pursuant to individual criminal responsibility and or state responsibility. With that being said, we now postpone the proceedings. We are aiming for a judgment around the middle of April, and we will, as guided by the prosecution, look at all the issues raised and come out with a written judgment at that time. Again, thank you to all the witnesses, thank you to counsel, and we now close these proceedings. Thank you.